Okay, I'm just gonna do a video. This is the easiest thing to do. So, this is the motor we'll be using. Don't just disregard. And for those of you who don't know, this will be posted to YouTube. Jeremy here, Jeeps Unlimited Parts Breakers, 7 acres. You know, we like to pride ourselves in rust-free. We're pretty much in anything Jeep yard, but I would say primarily we're narrowing it down to our main categories, which is going to be our body frame. Those are like your tubs, your frames, axles, engines, transfer cases, transmissions, brackets, you know. Just, I'm not going to go over everything because there's still, even though we have about 10,000 parts listed on our site now, that's going to go down to probably our main focus of about 1,200, but that's still a lot of parts to roll through, so I'm not going to obviously do that right now. This video is more or less to show a customer who sent us his Jeep, had a fire under his engine, or his, had a fire in the engine compartment, and we went into it was low miles. We were hoping just to, basically refurbish his old engine. But unfortunately, when we pulled the head on it, cylinders were pretty glazed, so it had obviously been hot at one time. And that brought up, okay, well, is it cheaper to machine this thing? And obviously right now, and has been for a long time, machining an engine, rebuilding it that way is much, much more expensive. If you don't have any other options, such as another good used motor, which that's what this guy is. So that's why I'm showing it. He asked for pictures of it, and normally, photos can do just in some cases, but I want to do a video on this one, a few things, because there's going to be some parts we reuse and there's going to be some parts we delete. Since he's got an old CJ and he's in a non-emission area, we're going to do away with some of the emission stuff on it. And make it run better, and still, be efficient and environmentally sound. Obviously, we're not modifying it in some ways that would make it. I'm just putting that as a statement of fact, okay? Because I know people out there that we're not taking any catalytic converters or anything off of it. That's not what we mean. It's mainly the vacuum stuff that they put on these Jeeps, especially in the mid 80s to early 90s on these old carb motors. So I priced you a carb from just the run-of-the-mill off of a CJ or YJ, which is just a Carter carb. That's not this carb. So, I mean, you could buy this one. I could price you on it. This is a Weber, and these are much better. They're much simpler, and this one obviously runs at our elevation and higher. This Jeep came out of Colorado, so that would be an option if you wanted to. Otherwise, we're going to stick a Carter on it. And, Carters are good carbs. I mean, the Webers are better just because they're simpler and they're a little easier to tune and mess with if you do need to. Disregard this filter here. It's kind of collapsed down. Looks like it's maybe even too small of a filter, but we can get the right size on there. But anyway, and then we're going to go with HEI on yours, simplify the ignition system, and essentially we'll be able to use the harness. We have another harness to replace yours with, and a factory harness, but we'll be able to you'll be able to have a very simple running Jeep at the end of the day. Same functionality you had before, but just simpler. So this is not yours, obviously, and for customers who, I did a video on his Jeep. I don't know if it's still posted or not, but just to show kind of the damage of the fire and parts, so that we can keep track of it, because we are a yard. You have to remember that we do service work here, and it's one of our major attributes to do this work is the fact that we have our own 7-acre yard in the back where we can pull our own parts. So you're not paying us to go hunt parts down, which is really where a lot of time that another shop is going to build. Now, with that said, I'm not discounting what other shops do. It's just what we are able to do because of who we are. So with that said, this is a YJ brake booster, master cylinder. Yours is going to be a CJ. There will be some differences there. Power steering is essentially the same, but your power steering pump looks okay, so we'll reuse that. Intake and exhaust, this is the same style you have, so we'll probably reuse yours if it's not warped, and we'll have to look at that. But if not, we have this one. And then this setup over here, obviously you don't need AC. This was a factory AC YJ. And this kit will be available. V-belt, it's kind of hard to find a V-belt AC setup. So for those who've been looking to add AC to either a CJ or a YJ with V-belt, this would be the setup you need. You need quite a bit of these parts, not only these brackets, but the pulleys and whatnot. So, but that's the engine, and it doesn't give you I mean, it's a little grimy at the top, but it doesn't look like it's leaking any more or less than any other 4.2 is. And we can obviously go through and do more. We kind of have it as less as at this point, just kind of a direct swap, but we can obviously do more if you want. And more would be, we talked about this a little bit. What would be more? Well, more would be, do you want to, refurb the motor at all? And not, when I say refurb, we're not talking machine work, but we're talking reseal stuff. There's that option. We still have that kit that we ordered initially for your motor. And that kit's like a complete reseal, so we're talking all gaskets, rear main, front main, timing covers, valve cover, oil pan, head. I wouldn't necessarily go to the extent of all that on this motor. I mean, we definitely could, but it would increase the cost substantially with labor to do, to further break it down. And then of course the parts that, again, we still have, so we definitely have some options. But you could decide, I think things like oil pump, timing sets, those are items that do typically wear, and it is not much more labor to do it if, while the engine's out. It's by far cheaper to do it when the engine's, loose than it is when the engine's installed. Oil pan, or oil pump, I should say, is not all that bad, but doing like a timing set on one of these, not super hard, but again, you got to pull everything off, and all this stuff is going to have to come off anyway, or most of it will, to remove it. So those are things, and I can definitely price it that way, but by all means, we're totally fine with just swapping it over and getting it going. And then if you decide later on to do some kind of either complete restoration or just want to, bring the motor. So everybody always asks this, and I like to address it as best I can, but obviously I'm not a genie. And how long is this motor going to last? Well, 4.2s are unpredictable. They're very, very good motors, but what kills 4.2s is a few things. One can just be not having them timed or tuned right, I should say. Running them lean, running them rich, overheating them. I mean, those are your general culprits of what kills any motor. Will kill one of these. These are, since they're old carb motors, there's a tendency to want to get out, especially on cold mornings, especially where we live, because we're higher elevation, and you're definitely high elevation. People on the East Coast, the West Coast that are at sea level don't probably have this issue, especially if they live in a moderate climate. But again, we don't. So what do people normally do to 4.2s that kills them? The biggest thing that kills a 4.2, its longevity, is getting out on a cold morning and pinning the fuel down to the floor and trying to start it and keeping it going. And that really comes back to just having a carb that's set up correctly. If it's set up correctly, you should be able to give it some choke, fire it up at an idle speed, maybe a little elevated idle, but not super high, and allow that oil to get from the bottom of the engine to the top of the motor, and let it do it on its own versus, kind of forcing its hand, which is, pinning the throttle down, throwing starting fluid in it, stuff like that. That kind of stuff you want to avoid. And the main reason is the way these oil themselves to the top. So this is extremely important when the Jeep is sat for a few days, a few weeks, a few months, and you go out and start it. We even have a tendency here, if we have an engine, especially one that we're working on, this one obviously has been drove the last couple days or weeks, but if we have something like my stepdad's Jeeps in there we're working on as well, on and off for him, and that thing hasn't been ran in like 5 years. Well, the motor's fine, it ran when it came out. Most people will get in there and just, put some fuel to it, fire it up, We are a little bit more cautious. Jerry will actually, he'll build an engine primer, just out of an old parts that we have laying around. And bumblebee. Anyway, whatever it is, it's piss off. So, and main reason is because it's essentially going to have a dry start the first time it fires up. So if he can prime that oil and bring that oil up to the top of the engine, you know, do we need to do it on this one? No. Most of them you don't, but that's definitely the precautions that we want to take. And same thing with yours. When we get it going, we want it to run well enough that you can, you know, I mean, we'd love to have it to where you can just reach in the window and fire it up. Will that happen on a car? Probably not. You probably have to play with it a little bit. But that's the reason these Webers are a little bit better. If they're tuned really well, you should be able to, in theory, reach in and fire this thing up. Now, just because this one's set up, you know, how it is right now doesn't mean it's fine-tuned, but I think, let's see, it's out of gear. So, this is what I mean by taking that card and letting Jerry go through it. Let's turn the air off. A couple pumps. And here's the man, the wizard himself. I was going to show kind of that carburetor setup, but I think that one probably needs to be a little bit more fine-tuned. I know it was running pretty good, but has it got a manual or electric choke on this guy? I think it's an electric, isn't it?
Yeah, that's probably.
But it looks like the wiring's kind of weird on this one, so.
Yeah, it might take a minute. Mess with that, get it to where it's at. I mean, actually, honestly, good. That's something otherwise, same thing with the carter. You just don't have that luxury of the time. But I think that's it. So hopefully, you guys get answers questions if you have any questions, give us a holler. But or if it's decide today, you have to decide to